So we have Pentecost, and it's a very wonderful day. And so I'm so glad to be getting to be here with you for Pentecost and have the Eucharist with you at this particular Sunday, which is not your usual custom, but it seems right somehow. And we hear in the readings about how it was foretold by Jesus himself that the Spirit would come. And then in the book of Acts, we hear about what it was like when the Spirit did come. And then there's, of course, the question about now. Does the Spirit come now? Or are we simply just remembering things? Well, the word memory, I think, suggests being present with something, not just simply having it as something we remember. There's a question, of course, about, well, will the Spirit come to the church? This question is asked and answered, I think, in a very interesting sort of cryptic way by, yes, every of you who have the Living Church as a magazine that you read, all over the cover there's this very wonderfully smiling man, Bishop Curry, who is going to be retiring after his 12-year term this summer. And so if you retire, you get to do an exit interview, don't you? I think that's what you do. And so we have his exit interview here. What comes next? I've got to get it organized in my mind. He's very informal. Helping the church. Oh, yes, that's what's next, isn't it? Oh, yes. Helping the church gracefully to decline. Because I don't think the numbers are going to reverse themselves. Oh, the numbers aren't going to do that. Another way to say it is helping the church to be transformed for the age in which it is, which has happened in Christian history before. Nothing new. Jesus is Lord, and that ain't changing. Oh, that's the man, all right. That's how he talks. God is still God. That ain't changing. The Spirit's still the Spirit. Faith ain't changing. And how that faith gets transmitted and lived out and organized, that's changing for this age. What worked in the 1950s doesn't necessarily work today, so why have that as an expectation of what the church should be? Well, I grew up in the 50s, didn't I? Some of you? Any of you? The 50s, a person named Elliot Lindsley likes to say, morning prayer built the church in the 50s and before that. So, you're not so old after all, are you? This is something that still works. You've got to have a good preacher, though, so I better retire. Got to have a good choir, and you don't have to retire. In other words, don't tell some poor suffering soul, oh, yeah, we don't have a priest tonight. Well, you better just do morning prayer. I'll show you how in 5 minutes. No, that's not what built the church. What built the church is the kinds of things you do. You take it very seriously. But there's Bishop Curry telling us that, not the 50s. So why have that as an expectation of what the church should be? Maybe it's one of the expectations. It served its time, and it'll serve it again. These are all my insertions, you know. Don't you think it's fun to have the opportunity to just put words in the mouth of the presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church? Oh, I'm having a great time. The mission goes on, but how we organize ourselves for it on a church-wide basis and at the diocese and in the local congregation, that's all going to change. And so we'll elect the presiding bishop that's needful at this time. Oh, Bishop Curry, who would you think should be the presiding bishop? We've got 5 candidates. Arg! It literally says that. Ah. Yeah, what do pirates say? Arg. That's what. He's a delightful person. Do you remember his great moment in Meghan's and Harry's wedding? He was I'll talk about him a little more later. Let's move on. But that's his take on where the church is going, the Christian church. So one could say in response to it something, let's put some words out from Ezekiel. That's, by the way, one of the readings that's possible for Pentecost. I looked and I saw in my vision a valley of dry bones, filled with dry bones. You remember that, of course. Fred Waring had a really wonderful rendition of that, didn't he? Ezekiel fitted them dry bones. And they all were sort of there, and they were pretty dry. So, is this the death of the church, or is it its birthday? I thought Pentecost was the birthday of the church. Let's not celebrate its death too much. But you remember he saw in the vision the Spirit of God come as a wind and blow on those bones, and they started rattling, and they came and they got sinews, and they flesh, and they began to come together, and they were a people again. Maybe it's the birthday of the church this time, too. We've had a lot of deaths and birthdays, even in my time. Do you remember the Death of God campaign? Well, it was on the cover of Time magazine, after all. Big black cover. Death of God. Is God dead? Well, then after that, because that was in the 60s, I believe, then all of a sudden certain things started happening. There was a church in Houston, Texas. It's called the Church of the Redeemer. It was a downtown church. People had left downtown who were Episcopalians, and this church was suffering in the kinds of ways that some churches are suffering these days. Very few people, very little life. The story has the rector, who is feeling called to that church, ending up sobbing in the basement next to the furnace. And then suddenly an idea comes to him. Well, why don't I just open this church to the community? And he did. And they did. That church flowered. All of a sudden there were all these people sharing with each other and caring for each other. That church came alive, and it was part of what they called the charismatic renewal. Oh yes, this is Pentecost, isn't it? Ever been in a Pentecostal church? Oh my. Oh, I don't mean just the happy clappy. That was funny? No, okay. I just mean that the Pentecostal church celebrates the presence of the Holy Spirit very seriously, and they really believe that God's going to do things right there. Well, God did things in Houston, Texas, and in many other places. Charismatic renewal. Now, of course, some would think of folks who were involved in that as charismaniacs. That was funny too. My jokes don't go. I've never been any good at telling jokes. Ever. I never have. I should stop. But there it was. And there it was happening. And the church came alive in a different way, in a very unexpected way. A person, when I was in seminary 2,000 years ago, I used to teach the church. What is the definition of the church? It's a teaching institution with room for explosions. There have been explosions. There will be explosions. Sometimes they will be with a few people, sometimes with many people, sometimes very quiet explosions like the one here. I think this is a very much unalive church. So the boats came together and the people rose up. Well, it also says in that same chapter with the vision of the bones coming together and the people coming back alive, it also says, you shall be clean from all your uncleannesses, and you shall have given up all your idols. Boy, do we need that in this country. Oh my. If one would say that there is no such thing as idolatry except one thing, and that's the idol is me. They're all expressions of me. You know, tell me what you eat and I'll tell you who your God is, and that kind of thing. Well, that is something that this country very needs to give up, and God is going to do a very different kind of a thing, because it's not going to be anything traditional. I don't think it's going to have to be bigger than that somehow. And it's going to involve a lot of people who aren't church-going folks. But we're here to identify them and celebrate them and give them an anchor, perhaps. That's something we can do. The worse it gets, the bigger God gets. That's a definition. It's just been always true. And I think some of you know that, and I certainly know it. It's when it gets very, very hard that we let go and let God somehow. There's another publication. It's the Living Church. I know whereof the psalmist speaks. You take away their breath, they die, and return to their dust. The breath is taken slowly and furtively as the body fights to live while weakening and falling into the abyss of death. Faith indeed says that death is not the end, and yet death feels like an end, the end of something, the end of someone, the end of life and hope. We must all at some time feel that our bones are all dried up and our hope is lost and we are cut off. In a time of captivity and crisis long ago, the people of Israel believed itself trapped by the specter of death, and the prophet Ezekiel says, "The hand of the Lord came upon me, and he brought me out by the Spirit of the Lord and set me down in the middle of a valley and showed the vision." In the valley of the shadow of death, there is a divine presence at work doing precisely this. You send forth your Spirit, and they are created, and so you renew the face of the earth. And we can believe that, and we can proclaim that. It's for us to do just that. I'm really sorry for those who are the witnesses of God, supposedly, and have gotten themselves involved in politics to the point where they've blown the witness. Let's not be primarily political, any form of political. Let's be witnesses of God, and let God be God. I often think about what I'm doing when I go to the altar here or at other churches around us. And about the second Sunday of Easter, I listened to the gospel reading about how somehow Jesus appeared as if he went through a wall or something in the upper room. Well, the Spirit comes through a wall or something into this upper room. Very glad we're having the Eucharist today, and that we're going to pray for the world and for each one of us and the ones we love.